anyway, so this dude that was kind of officiating the test, I was like, can you help me translate? He goes, yeah, no problem. So, and his English was actually not much better than my Spanish, but we figured between my Spanish and his English, we figured out a way to communicate, right? First question comes up. I said, I think it means this. Is that right? And he goes, yes. And I said, I think this is the answer. And he goes, yeah. So I hit it. And it's the answer. Second one comes up and I'm like, what does this word mean? And he goes, it means something like something, something, something. And I go, that question doesn't really make sense. And he goes, I think it's C. So I hit C. It's correct. This continues. And pretty soon I'm just pushing the buttons and he's telling me the answers to every question because he wants to get it over with. He's standing there babysitting me and he wants to get it over with. And he sees that I'm an old man. I can drive a fucking car.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back today with somebody we love to have, somebody who is an artist, creative mind, and kind of a philosophical guy. He's just a very down-to-earth human being. We've got Dan Piraro from Bizarro Comics and other stuff. How you doing today, Dan?
I am well. Thanks for having me on.
We've been talking for about an hour straight before we actually hit the record button, and we probably should have hit it at the beginning. So nice to have you. You're awesome. Everybody loves your comics. And for the people that don't know, go out and check it out because it's wonderful. All that. So you strike me as someone who has a grasp on philosophy, art, and humor. You grew up in Middle America. What kind of effect did growing up in Middle America have on your kind of artistic process?
Well, I think that in general, anywhere anybody comes from has an enormous effect on who they become. And the funny thing was that my whole family, I grew up mostly in Oklahoma, and my whole family still lives in Oklahoma and are happy to do so. Whereas I, even as a kid, couldn't wait to get out of there. I had a different mentality. And so all through my early adulthood, trying to become the artsy fartsy cool guy that I wanted to be, I always wished my parents had been like New York academics or intellectuals or artists, and raised me in that culture. But the truth is, when I became a cartoonist, the thing that I do best is to parody average America. And if I hadn't grown up in average America, I wouldn't be able to do that. I'd be doing these stuck-up New Yorker cartoons that nobody understands who doesn't live in New York. Not that all New Yorker cartoons are that obscure. They're not. I'm just saying, but there is the occasional New Yorker cartoon. I used to live in New York, where you're like, I will read it and I'll go, oh, if I hadn't lived there, I wouldn't know what that even means. And I'll bet most people don't. Anyway, so thank goodness I grew up in Oklahoma where I could where I could have a decent career parodying Middle America. That's my short answer.
That's the Seinfeld effect. When I grew up, I didn't know anything about New York City. And when I finally did, everything that I knew about was from New York City was from watching Seinfeld as a very young kid. So, I'm an artist too, and I understand how hard it is to find success in a creative field. What was your journey of becoming successful? Did you have a moment where you thought, hey, I'm making it?
No. Well, I still don't feel like I've made it, whatever that even means. I mean, and now I'm at the point where I realize that doesn't really mean anything. There's no such thing as, you don't make it. There is no make it. But I know what you mean, because when I was younger, I really thought like that was what I was hoping to do. I was hoping that, the thing is that I got a scholarship to a university, on an art scholarship, and I quit after a semester. I just didn't like it and just decided to try to do things my own way. And that led to several years of just crap jobs, like you can imagine, just minimum wage jobs. And at some point, I decided, and then I happened to meet a commercial artist, and I started apprenticing with him, and he was teaching me how to illustrate for commercial stuff, and I was making decent money, but I really didn't like it because it wasn't creative at all. It's just like, here's how you draw this bag of chips, here's how you draw this 6-pack of soda pop or beer or whatever like that. We were just like literally drawing products. And so I was really just bored out of my mind with that. I really hated it. And I got the idea to start to draw cartoons and send them in to whoever it was that published those things and see if I could get them in the newspaper. Like, I just thought, well, maybe I could do that. Anybody could do that, right? It looked easier than it turned out to be. But I thought, well, anybody can like just draw silly pictures every day for a living. Wouldn't that be cool? I'd love to have that job. So I started drawing cartoons and sending them off. And anyway, it took me a few years, but I got signed. I eventually, one of the syndicates decided to give me a try. And so they signed me up, and I didn't know anything. I didn't know how that business worked. So that was the day that I thought I had made it. I thought, my ship has come in. I'm a syndicated cartoonist now. I'm going to be making a big salary. I can quit my advertising job, just walk away from it next week, and I'll be, not realizing that that's not at all how that industry works. The way it works is that they send a salesman out with a satchel full of cartoons, and that person tries to sell them to each individual newspaper all around the country. And it's not only until you have hundreds and hundreds of sales, which you're splitting 50-50 with the syndication company, by the way. So you're only making half the money that you're getting, that the cartoon is generating. It takes years to even make anything approaching even a low income. Like the first year of cartooning, 365 cartoons, original ideas and drawings. I made $1,000 in my whole first year because I had so few papers. So no, I didn't quit my commercial art job. No, I hadn't made it. What I had done was signed on for a really shitty paying second job. That was what I had done, because I still had to work all day in this advertising studio and then come home at night, play with my kids, eat dinner with the family, give them a bath, read to them, put them to bed, and then start cartooning late at night. Like, that was when and on weekends. So it was, and everything after that, of course, was also gradual. Eventually I was able to quit commercial art and just do Bizarro. But it all happens so very gradually. And I'm not one of those people like Doonesbury or Peanuts who just became fabulously wealthy millionaires and sold, millions of books and products and all. Like, Bizarro is just not that kind of a property. It's more of a cult following type property. So the money I made is very middle income. And I ended up retiring in Mexico because it's cheaper and I can afford to retire here. I don't think I'd ever be able to afford to retire in the United States, not in a city that I would actually want to live in. I might could afford to retire in Lincoln, Nebraska, but I don't want to live in Lincoln, Nebraska.
No, there's no snow down where you are, right?
No, it doesn't snow. I mean, it snows in Mexico at high elevations. We're actually at high elevation, but not high enough to be cold enough to snow.
Okay.
Yeah. I live right in the middle of the country. If you put a dart in what you thought was the middle of that banana-shaped country.
What state?
Guanajuato.
Okay, so a little bit to the west of Mexico City and south.
Yeah, we're kind of northwest of Mexico City.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a 4-hour drive, 3.5. Without traffic, it's like 3.5-hour drive to Mexico City.
Okay. Desert.
It's high desert. It looks like the area around Los Angeles, and our weather is very similar. And it's the reason it doesn't get impossibly hot in the summertime here. It doesn't. By the way, first let me just say it doesn't get impossibly hot here in the summer, and the reason is because of the high elevation. So we have like a month where the weather kind of will touch 90 degrees. But it's not a humid heat, and so 90 degrees, I grew up in Oklahoma and then I lived in Texas for years. 90 degrees is nothing. Yeah. So that doesn't bother me in the least. And in the wintertime, like, our overnight lows this week are in the 30s, but then the daytime highs are close to 70, 65 to 70. So it's a kind of a Southern California style weather that we have here.
Reminds me of the Joshua Tree. Yeah.
Yeah. The worst part is that in recent years, we're not getting enough rain. And if that continues, then there's going to be a big water crisis.
That's the bigger trend of horrible things yet to come.
Yeah. The climate. It's the whole climate change thing.
Yeah. Great. You have nopales? You eat cactus over there yet?
Yeah.
Pretty good. My first loved it.
Yeah, I kind of like. I don't mind it. I'm actually a picky eater, but I will eat that. I will eat those. I prefer them with other things. Like I'll put them in a fajita or something, burrito, that kind of thing. Like you put it in with the other kinds of vegetables. When you eat it all by itself, they're kind of slimy.
Yeah, right.
A little disturbing. They have that kind of viscousy slipperiness that cactuses have.
It's like a slimy, what do you call it? Bell pepper. Yeah.
Yeah. But of course, those cactuses are just all over the place. We walk our dogs right outside of town. We walk our dogs out in the country every morning, and there's like any number of like that's the kind of we have like little mesquite trees and a lot of cactuses, a lot of paddle cactuses, and what are called garumbuyo, which is the kind that have like long. The whole thing sort of looks like a tree, but it's individual cactus beams are about that big around, and they kind of curve and go straight up and have stripes down them. And they're really cool. I like them.
I love that. I do. I'm a plant nerd and I'm a nature nerd, so I'm all about that.
Yeah, I'm also kind of an amateur birder. I carry binoculars with me and spot all my favorite birds and try to name them and stuff. There's a bird down here called a caracaraca, which looks like people used to call it a Mexican eagle, but it's not actually even an eagle. It's related to other types of hawks or something. But it's like a big ass, this big bird. It looks just like a bald eagle, except the top of its head, it's like white from the neck up, like a bald eagle, right? The same kind of great beak. And then the top of its head is black with a ponytail shooting out the back. It's incredible. And then their wingspan is like 3 feet, 4 feet, and they're just gorgeous. And they have like white legs and white wingtips. They're really cool. We see them all over the place.
What's the owl situation in the high desert?
I don't know. I don't get out at you kind of have to be aware. You have to be out around dusk and stuff to be aware of owls, right? Because they're nocturnal, and I don't ever go out at dark because I don't know where to go. I'm too old.
Yeah, for safety reasons.
I'm past the age where I give a shit about nightlife, and I can't stand places with loud music.
Right, but you're not in a town, though, are you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I live in a small town.
Okay.
It's a Spanish colonial town. San Miguel de Allende is what it's called, and it's a Spanish colonial town built, I don't know, 600 years ago or more. And so it's cobblestone streets and big cathedral in the middle of town. It's really beautiful. It's a very popular tourist place, more popular all the time, unfortunately. Anyway, that's where we live.
Nice. I love Mexico. I really miss all the aspects of Mexico. And yeah, I'm in Germany. If I was forced to go back to North America, I would just boot, scoot, and boogie on down back to Mexico because I don't know.
Okay, well, dig this then. One thing that I love about Mexico is that it's not for everybody, but it's kind of like the Wild West. They don't. Like laws get bent here more.
I have a feeling we're about to exchange some good stories. Yeah. Go ahead.
Perfect example was that when I first came here. My driver's license. When I first came here, I traded in my American driver's license, which was for a motorcycle and a car. And I didn't bring a car here, but I did bring a motorcycle. And so when I traded in my driver's license, they said you can have one or the other, but you can't have both on the same license. I'm like, really? Okay, it's a different country. They have different rules. So I could just get a motorcycle license because that's what I was driving. Well, anyway, years go by. I've had that license for 5 years and it expired. Well, I don't have a motorcycle anymore. And so like foolishly, I let the thing expire. But then when I went back to go get a new one, and the fact that it wasn't that I want a car license now instead of motorcycle, they treated me as though, legally it was just like the first time I was getting a driver's license. And so I had to take the written test and the driving test. The written test is in Spanish only. It's one of those computer screens with the touch button answers, and you have to be able to speak. It's 30 questions in Spanish, and I've been working on Spanish for 6 years now, but I couldn't understand. I could kind of understand some of the questions. And I could look up sometimes I would type in the whole question into my translator, and it would come back in English in it just didn't make any sense. Not even in English did it make any sense. Anyway, so this dude that was kind of officiating the test, I was like, can you help me translate? He goes, yeah, no problem. So, and his English was actually not much better than my Spanish, but we figured between my Spanish and his English, we figured out a way to communicate, right? First question comes up. I said, I think it means this. Is that right? And he goes, yes. And I said, I think this is the answer. And he goes, yeah. So I hit it. And it's the answer. Second one comes up and I'm like, what does this word mean? And he goes, it means like something like something, something, something. And I go, that question doesn't really make sense. And he goes, I think it's C. So I hit C. It's correct. This continues. And pretty soon I'm just pushing the buttons and he's telling me the answers to every question because he wants to get it over with. He's standing there babysitting me and he wants to get it over with. And he sees that I'm an old man. I can drive a fucking car. He just, it's like, he's like, what's the point of making me jump through hoops to get, so he's just like, it's D. This one is B. and we get them all right. 30 for 30. And then he takes me on the driver's test. He goes, do you have your car up? I go, yeah. He goes, let's go. He goes, just go down that street. I go down. He goes, turn left, turn left, turn left. We go back to the parking lot. We just go around the block. And that was all he asked me to do. And I said, in the United States, you have to like parallel park and stuff. And he goes, well, we're supposed to do that here too, but I just want to know if you can drive a car. But you can drive. Like, why, why go through the big thing? Obviously, I'm a person who knows how to drive a car. Like, just get the guy out of here. That's what I love about Mexico.
The death of bureaucracy. Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
Oh, no, they love bureaucracy. And that's the other thing. Now, this is the worst part about Mexico is when you first get there, you stand in line to find out that you need to go next door and get copies of your driver's license from a copy shop. So then you come back and do that and get back in line again. And then they tell you, here's a piece of paper. You need to go to one of the local convenience stores and pay the fee through their computer system. You don't pay there. You pay at the local 7-Eleven, which is OXXO down here.
Yeah.
So then we go to an OXXO and they say, oh, we don't have that system. Go to the next OXXO. So we got to go that. So it's this shit, like that's the part of Mexico that makes you crazy. And then you come back and they say, okay, now you need one more copy of something else. And you go next door. Why didn't you just ask me that when you sent me to get the copies earlier? Why didn't you tell me I'm going to need another one?
Like sending you in town to just drive you crazy and stimulate their local economy just a little bit.
It is. And that's the thing is that they say the reason you have to go to so many different places to get things done is it's a way of making work. It's a way of making jobs for people. Like this is the person who stamps the paper. This is the person to whom you pay the paper. And then you take the paper back and give it to the other person. And that's 3 jobs instead of just one. And it's like a way of taking care of society by creating work or something. I don't know. It's crazy.
I did notice that about the tow truck drivers and police in the United States. When I was like hoboing around the United States, it was always the tow truck drivers and the cops showing up at the same time and winking at each other and going, okay, I got you some money here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Kickback. But, we often say that Mexico makes easy things hard and hard things easy. And I mean, they certainly made that, they made that driving test in Spanish very easy. Yeah. Just give me the answers.
That's so awesome.
But then they made the paying for it and the documentation very hard. We had to run all over town and pay different people and get different copies. And that's Mexico.
When I came across the border in this piece of shit car and they pulled me over, and they pulled me over lots of times and extorted money from me. And they, he was like, hey, you got to give me a little bit of money to get on your way. And it was like 200 pesos every time. And one of the first times though, they pulled me over, extorted the money from me and then grabbed the cup out of the center console and said, give me that cup. And they smelled it and they go, you been drinking? And I go, no, I swear I haven't been drinking. They say, oh, okay, you want to go right up the street? There's a bodega. You want to get yourself a beer because if you travel through Mexico, you got to have a drink. I was like,
oh, wow. No
what
way.
A different world.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Well, when I first moved here and went to get my, I know what it was. I bought a motorcycle from a neighbor here that I knew. And I bought his motorcycle and I went to the DMV to get the plates swapped out, right? And they told me that I couldn't get the plates until I brought back a utility bill with my name and address on it. So I said, okay, so my motorcycle now has no plates until I can get this utility bill, right? And they said, that's right. And I said, well, what am how can I ride my motorcycle with no plates? What if the police stop me? And the woman said, and she had very good English, but she's Mexican, and she goes, the police are not going to stop you. This is Mexico. They're not going to stop you. This is Mexico.
I love
that
this.
Was the answer to that. Just because you have no plate on your bike, the cops don't care about that.
Okay. See, I would totally believe her.
For like months. I didn't bother going back to get my plate for like 4 or 5 months because I was like, well, there's no hurry. This is Mexico. They're not going to stop me, apparently. And they didn't.
Yeah. That was eventually I realized, hey, nobody cares. And I said, I drove along. I saw weird, wild shit that I said, really, I'm not the least of everybody's concern. And if anything, I'm just a moment of like quick extortion for police and things like this. But I also had an expired license and they looked at it and said, mucho problema, Senor Jeffries, mucho problema. And then it was,
Yeah.
send you on your way.
I've done that. I've been stopped a couple of times for no good reason. And the thing is like it ends up being like 12, 15, 20 bucks. $20, $15 not to get your car towed. I was driving around without a license for a long time and I had to pay off some cops because they'll tow your car. If you don't have a valid, I learned this on the driver's test a couple of days ago that I was not taking. Anyway, yeah, but that's the penalty for driving without a license is they take your car, they impound your car and you get a ticket. And then you got to go pay to get your car out. So I was happy to give the guy $25 to avoid that. And that was it. Like, I don't get the ticket. I don't get my car towed. $25. Yeah. I mean, a traffic ticket in the U.S. is like $200.
Isn't that better than the United States in a weird way? It's like it's corruption, but it's good.
That's my point. Get it over with right here, right now. I don't have to go down somewhere and pay somebody. I don't have to go get my car out. Any of the bullshit. Just pay the guy now and go home and everybody's happy. Just the way work.
On my way out of Mexico, I was deathly sick with E. coli. I was driving back to the United States, basically from Guatemala, as fast as I could. And I got stopped by one of the last police close to the border. And I said, look, I've got fucking this much money left. And I really had the last of my money in this cop's face. And he said, all right, he grabbed the whole stack, split it in half with me, gave me back half, and then rubbed my shoulder and said, hey, good luck. I hope you get home. See you.
Yeah. Sometimes you get that. That's the thing is that Mexicans can be incredibly generous and friendly. And you find that a lot here, especially in this small town. I'm sure Mexico City is a little different. I love Mexico City. We visit there several times each year. It's such a great place. But here in a small town, life is a little bit slower and simpler. And these people are like just very generous, family oriented. They're not jealous of the fact that I have a bigger house than they do. They actually think it's kind of sad that these two gringos live in that big house all by themselves. That's not that big by American standards, but by their standards, it's huge. They're all like 3 generations living in what we would consider to be a motel room. That's just the way their culture works here.
Yeah. What do you think it is? Do you think they just think it's not the size of the house, but what love you put in it?
Yeah, they're very family oriented. It's not, and I'm talking about the lower middle class and the lower class here, the kind of just regular folks. They're not doing without, but they don't have extra. They're what in America would pass for poor. But here it's kind of a standard lower middle class, the kind of people that we meet because they are gardeners and housekeepers and handymen and construction guys. Like those are the kind of people that we hire for various things and that we meet and we know their families and we know where they live, how they live, and we know our neighbors. We live in a Mexican neighborhood. In fact, our street is, oddly enough, this town has a lot of gringos, a lot of Americans and Canadians and a few Europeans, Australians and whatever, but this town is like 25% white folks and then 75%. And I say white meaning foreigner because many native Mexicans are also white because they're of European descent, Spanish descent, as opposed to indigenous.
Yeah.
That's something a lot of people who don't go to Mexico a lot don't realize, I think. But anyway, so this town is about 75% expats and 75% Mexicans. But the Mexicans here are mostly that kind of low income type, and they're very family oriented. I mean, if they have their family around them, they're happy. They don't care as much about a nice house or lots of room or a new car or the kind of stuff that Americans typically care about. And they think that even though we have more money than they do, that it's kind of sad because we don't have our family with us. It's just us. It's just me and my wife living here alone. And that to them seems sad because they will live 2 and 3 and 4 generations in the same housing complex. Like a lot of times there'll be a courtyard, and like this room over here belongs to this family. This belongs to this family. There's a common kitchen. This family has it. This family has it. And as the kids get older and get married, they'll build a room on top of their house and then another one. And they end up kind of building these compounds where several generations of the family live together. And what's cool about it is that when one of them gets sick or injured or disabled or loses their job, the rest of them kind of pitch in, and it's a community pot. They don't go without eating. They don't go without clothing. They don't go without school supplies because daddy fell off a ladder and can't work anymore, or whatever. Like right. The rest of the family covers for them.
Yeah.
It's a pretty cool system. I can understand the logic behind it.
We took a wrong left turn in Albuquerque when it came to family values in America. The consumer culture had led us down this path where we're so individualistic that we just can't stand our own family and stuff. It's
yeah, it's a religion of independence. The United States, this myth of independence. The not only just this lack of realization that everything is connected. You cannot abuse anything without experiencing the consequences of that abuse yourself. Yeah. We are all part of the same organism, the same thing.
Yeah.
And Americans don't get that. They think as long as I'm getting mine, fuck you. And that's just it's suicide is what it is. It's slow suicide.
Yeah. Yeah. You think you're getting yours, but actually you're shooting yourself in the foot and everybody else in your neighborhood. So, you obviously have had a philosophical journey up and down, left and right, throughout your life. How has your philosophy changed over the years? What has been some of the massive shifts in philosophy? This is like a general kind of question.
I had a really massive shift, for a good 30 years between the ages of I would say like from 30 to 60. In the age of 30 to 60, I was a science-based atheist. And I made fun of religious people. I went through a religious stage as a kid and a teenager. I took it very seriously. I got despondent about it. I became disappointed. The typical kind of thing. I became agnostic. And then I eventually just became an atheist. And I was a real card-carrying atheist. And then I moved to Mexico. And my wife is a much more spiritual person just naturally. She's not a religious person, but she's a spiritual person, and she investigates all kinds of philosophical, spiritual, and theological ideas and just tries them on to see if they make sense to her, if they work for her, if she likes them, whatever. And I always admired that, but I always thought it was some bullshit. I thought, well, these are mind tricks, these are the things that we tell ourselves to make ourselves happy. And maybe that's totally true. Fine, whatever. But anyway, that was my attitude toward it. And then, and I took up meditating a few years back, and I like meditating, and I was doing it entirely scientifically because it's good for your brain. Anyway, so one time, just a few years ago, my wife was, she was talking about some stuff that she had been reading about, that she was into. And she said, I've been doing this guided meditation lately that I really like. And I said, well, what is it? What was it? And she goes, well, here, I'll just play it for you. I recorded it on my iPhone, so I'll just play it so I wouldn't have to read it, while I was meditating. So anyway, she says, here, I'll just play it for you. She's like sculling around the room, putting away laundry, doing something. I forgot what she was doing. She was busy. And I was sitting on the bed, just propped up against some pillows. And I like to meditate. So I thought, okay, I'll play along. So I closed my eyes, and I've done guided meditations before. And, it's usually people saying, you're sitting by a stream, imagine the water flowing by, whatever. There's a million different ways to do it, but that's the kind of thing I'm used to. So anyway, so I started doing this guided meditation, and with not 1 minute in. So I wasn't really into it. It takes a while. Meditators know it takes a while, take a few minutes to get slide into that place, to get to that. And so I'm not really even there. I'm just listening with my eyes closed and relaxing and just kind of getting into the groove. And the thing says, imagine a light coming down from the top of the universe and passing through your body. Hold your arms. Imagine your arms are straight out to the left and right, and another beam of light is going through your arms back and between, from hand to hand, through your body, that direction, in the form of a cross. And it's supposed to represent the four directions: north, south, east, west. Right. So it's that kind of a. So anyway, as it's describing this, and I'm imagining this in my mind, I suddenly feel I just had this mystical experience. I felt this tremendous rush of energy through my being, like a fire hose, both directions. And I mean, it just almost tore me apart with ecstasy. And I was on nothing at the time. No drugs whatsoever. And I began sobbing, and then I began laughing, and then I began sobbing, and it just kept happening. And all I could bring myself, and my wife came over and says, "Are you okay? Are you okay? Don't talk unless you have to, don't talk if you don't want to, or answer me when you can," something like that. She's being very, because she, like I said, she's sort of a spiritual person. So she realized I was having some kind of a mystical experience. Anyway, it was mind blowing. And the only thing I could say is, what's happening to me? What's happening to me? What's happening to me? And I would sob and sob for 5 seconds, and then just laugh uncontrollably for 5 or 10 seconds, and then just sob and sob. And it was the strangest thing. And this went on, I don't know, 3 to 5 minutes.
Wow.
And then I just started coming out of it. I was out of breath. I was like, what just happened? What just happened? And that was the other thing, is that the culmination of the whole thing was this very strong knowing, this download. Mm. And the download was, you are not an accident. Know what you know. It makes me tear up to say it.
Yeah.
I thought this was an incredibly emotional experience.
So how did that affect you afterward? Do you always carry a piece of that with you when you get in stressful situations or stuff like that? When do you bring this up?
I've had a number of other experiences since. They didn't come rapidly. They would come every few months or twice a year or whatever. This was 3 years ago that happened. And since then I've had 3 or 4 more similar episodes. All of them were a little different, but they were the same kind of extremely powerful emotional experience that I can only describe as spiritual. And when this happened to me, I was a completely science-based atheist, and I thought that spirituality is something that we make up because we need to. And I was not in the mindset of needing to make this up, nor did I even know what would it even look like. I had no desire or concept to invent some kind of a mystical, anyway. And it just changed I began to see everything differently. It changed my worldview, changed my universal view. I kind of talked about this a bit on my blog, because I can't keep my own secrets.
Dan Piraro cannot play his cards close to his chest.
I can keep anybody else's secrets, but I cannot keep my own. I must always tell everything about, I don't know. My wife says, you must tell your story. You seem that's your only switch. Tell a story.
It's healthy for you. It's good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And cartoons are a way of telling tiny stories a day at a time. So that's part of how I do that. But anyway, what was I talking about?
This realization, then carrying it with you, and then having more experiences as you go, and realizing.
Yeah. I mentioned it. Oh, yeah, I mentioned it on my blog, and I asked people. I said, if you've ever had any kind of if you've read any really interesting spiritual books, I'd be, not religious stuff, but just, philosophical kind of spiritual things. Anyway, a lot of people suggested some really interesting books. I gave them all a try, and I read most of them. But the guy that I really fell in love with was Alan Watts. Alan Watts was a British philosopher who spent most of his adult life in the United States during the 50s and 60s and 70s. He was kind of a hippie philosopher. And he was the first person to bring a lot of the concepts of Zen, Buddhism, and he was an expert. He was extremely well educated. And even became an Episcopal priest at one point, and then they asked him to leave because he wouldn't keep Eastern philosophy out of his Western Episcopalianism. But he's a real expert on Asian history and sorry,
you're all good.
Rock on the table. Asian history and the history of spirituality and philosophy in Asia, and the differences between that and Western theology and philosophy. And so, and those are what his books are really about, is like explaining the whole concept of how it's always now, these kind of basic Buddhist concepts. He's sort of one of the very first people to bring these to the Western world in a pop culture kind of, in a popular way. His books were very popular. He's written like 25 books, and I've read probably 20 of them. Anyway, I fell in love with his work and a lot of other people's, but I now believe that I just no longer believe that life on planet Earth was an accident of chemical soup. I fully believe in evolution. I consider myself now a science-based mystic because I am no less science-based than I ever was. It's just that I now no longer believe that if science cannot measure it, it doesn't exist. I think much more exists than we can see or realize scientifically at this point. And I think that there is a system of consciousness and energy that is possible to dip into, visit, receive. And I have also begun to believe, because I've had the experience so many times, that when I'm doing a piece of art, that I'm not like the way I paint. For instance, look at this painting up above me here. This is an oil painting of
nice.
George Washington in the mid. Let me see if I can. He's holding a branch of a cherry tree, and he has like a trompe l'oeil American flag over his wanger. Oh my! And he's on a stage. He's on a stage in front of the Grand Canyon. There's a what do you call that thing? A curtain up around the side. Anyway, so I do these elaborate. All my life, or my adult life, I've been doing these elaborate oil paintings.
God, that's amazing, man.
And the thing is, like, I would just, the way I would compose them is I just look at a blank thing and see an image in the middle, and then I would begin to put that in there. And then when that was done, I would look at the rest of it and go, what's next? Oh, there's a tree here. And so it was always a very kind of improvisational. And I've done this with many, many paintings. There's another one in that room, another big painting.
Cool. I've seen that one before too.
There. Yeah, you can find that online at Diego Ferraro.
Oh, cool. It's very Mexican style.
Yeah. It does have a very Mexican feel to it. I painted that back when I lived in Texas.
Cool.
But anyway, those kind of paintings is I would compose my paintings in that way, like a piece at a time until it was finished, and then I had no idea what it was going to be or what it was going to mean. But when it's finished and I spend some time looking at it, I begin to understand the story behind it. And I always thought I was just some genetic skill I had. Now I believe that those paintings come to me from elsewhere. And the other thing that happened right before this very first mystical meditation thing, was that a story started popping in my head while I was working on Bizarro. And it was just a scene from a story, like the first few scenes of this cowboy in a desert riding his horse, and he's being chased by somebody, I don't know who, and his horse breaks a leg jumping over a little canyon thing, and he has to run and hide in a cave, and he's got a 10-year-old boy with him, and they find some stuff in the cave, and he eats it and he falls asleep and he wakes up and the boy's gone and like this. So I just was writing it down like, I don't know what the fuck, what is the story that I'm writing? And then it would stop. And a week later, the next scene would come to me. And so I'd write it down, then I'd go back to drawing and it would stop. So this story started coming to me over time. And it ended up being what is now a graphic novel called Peyote Cowboy. And I finished the story. It took me a little over a year to write the story. And then I started illustrating it and posting it online at peyotecowboy.net, not com or org, but net.
.net.
Peyotecowboy.net.
Did you say peyotecowboy.net?
I did. Peyotecowboy.net. PEYOTECOWBOY.net. And I'm posting it as I illustrate it, episode by episode. And like once a month, I'll drop a new episode. And it's completely free. You don't have to pay or put up with ads or pop-ups or any bullshit. You can just go you can read the whole story, and sign up to be notified by email when a new episode is posted. Anyway, and that story, I'll tell you, every single day I would sit down to work on that story, and I didn't know where it was going. In fact, I've never had an experience. Like I say, I've had that experience with paintings. They would just come to me in pieces, but I've never had that with language. I've never had it with a story. And I'd be typing along, and this would happen, and they'd run into this person, and they'd go into town and do this. And then suddenly somebody would ride up on a horse and jump in the room and say, "Pa, somebody shot my husband." And I had no idea who these people were or who was being killed or why. And I would follow that and then later, 75 pages later, the whole thing folds back in and I see who they are, why this was working. And the whole plot was just like weaving itself together. And it was mind blowing. I would write all day long. And then at cocktail hour, when my wife and I would hit the patio with our margaritas, I would say, you wouldn't believe what happened in Peyote Cowboy today. And so then I would update her on the story. I mean, people can say that's bullshit if they want to, and I don't care. It doesn't matter. And I experienced it, and it was just the weirdest thing. I didn't write that story. I was just hired to type it and illustrate it.
And this is what you really were. You're a true creative in the sense I've heard this time and time again from people who are truly creative, that this story happens to you. And this goes back to a story I heard about a songwriter from the 30s who said, I'd be working out in the field and I'd hear a poem coming over the horizon like a train. And my job was to run inside and grab a pen and paper and write down this thing while it passed through me. And if I couldn't get to the pen and paper in that time, then that train would just keep going the other way until it found another poet somewhere out in the so this idea that this shit just happens, it makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's not a brand new idea. The Romans believe this is what the concept of the muses was. The Romans believed that muses visited people with inspiration and ideas, and if you turned them down, they went on to the next person. And that's truly what it feels like. It really does feel that way. I think that really great art and music and writing, whatever, I think quite often, personally, I feel like that's a person who is connected to that other realm that is feeding that stuff to us. I know it sounds like mystical bullshit, but it's just been my experience. It's like I have certain skills that help me edit it and produce it, but the inspiration itself is not something that I'm creating with my mind. It's something that's coming through me.
Right.
And it's exactly what when writers say the story wrote itself, that's what they mean.
Yeah.
You get an idea and you start to type and the characters and the whole thing just plays out and you just hang on for the ride. And when it's done, it's done. And I mean, you go back, of course, and it's not like word for word exactly everything it needs to be. You go back and you fine tune. And that's what I'm saying. Those are the skills that you have to edit these ideas that come to you and to produce them. But the the project itself came from somewhere else.
Right.
I'm just convinced of it.
Have you ever met somebody that had that kind of intuition, but didn't have like the technical skills in order to get it out? Somebody that you thought, oh, this guy is somehow magically connected as well. Because I think I've met people like that.
Yeah, I that's just it. Is that any person? I think any person, if you just open your mind to the potential, it can begin to happen to you. I think when you're convinced that you understand reality and that's not a part of it, then it's not going to happen. And I think that's one of the great mind shifts in my of wisdom. This is one of the great things that older. I'm not old, but as you get older, the wisdom you accrue begins to tell you that. I lost my train of thought.
What your wisdom at your age about, being able to tap into creative energy, that anybody can really do it at any time.
Oh, yeah. Here's what I want to say is that when you convince yourself that these things don't exist, because for 30 years I was convinced these things didn't exist. I was staking my reputation on it. Mm. And when you stop that, when you open your mind to the idea, the reality that you really have no idea what reality is. Explain to me what your consciousness is. No one can. Everyone's been thinking about it. No one's come up with a good answer yet. Consciousness is not understood by science. It is not a thing you can explain because you're having to look at it with consciousness. It's like, and the Buddhists say it's like your teeth trying to bite themselves, or a knife trying to cut itself. You can't step away from your consciousness to figure out what the hell consciousness is.
That's funny. Yeah. And this is why it goes on to the psychedelic thing, which is one of the things that can really help. Meditation's one thing, but then the psychedelics, that for me, that really pushed me to the next level. So
I like psychedelics. I don't like major doses. I like smaller doses. I find that to be a lot more mind opening, expanding for me. Is to take a kind of a moderate dose of psilocybin, like 2 grams, and then just feel the universe, feel that energy, ask the questions. I did this once a few years ago and asked what happens when you die. And my spirit, because I wasn't hallucinating. I hadn't taken enough mushrooms to hallucinate. I wasn't in some other dimension, but I could feel my essence was just sucked up into the sky, into these clouds. I was outside on a patio looking up at these beautiful clouds, and I just got swept up. And again, this download, this knowing, what you're doing now is the hard part. Life is what's hard. When you die, it's easy. You go right back to where you came from. You go back to the flow of the universe, and you're going to love it. Your parents are going to love it. I was also, at the time, I was very worried about my parents dying. They were in their mid 80s and having health problems. And this was my question. It's like, what happens when you die? And I was worried about my parents. And the whole thing was like, your parents are going to love it. You're going to love it. It's so easy. Don't worry about it. Just enjoy. And it was, 4 years later, it cured my fear of death. It's not like I don't walk on train tracks in the middle of the night or anything. I don't mean that kind of fear of death. I just mean that I no longer have a lot of anxiety for myself or my loved ones for what happens when you die.
Yeah. They're the eventual impending exit.
Because it's good.
Right. This plagues the most creative people or smart, intellectual people, lifelong thing. Since I was 10, I get up in the middle of the night crying, thinking, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
Everything's going to die.
Existential angst. I mean, I suffered from it for years. I was on antidepressants for 20 years.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And now I do meditation and the occasional soft psychedelic, and I'm good to go, man. I'm a lot happier and more balanced and sort of mood balanced than I used to be on antidepressants. And I'm just much more available to my emotions. That's the thing. Things can make me cry.
Good.
Which on antidepressants, I could never cry.
How did you slip into that dark world of pharmaceutical antidepressants? I always heard horror stories. I'm glad that my mom was too poor to afford that kind of treatment.
I was tremendously depressed after my first divorce. I had a couple of daughters. One was preteen, the other one was a teenager. And I just thought that our divorce was going to ruin their lives and ruin my life. And I was just profoundly depressed. And I had had a lot of problems with depression all through my 20s, thinking that it was really just chemical. Like I just didn't have the serotonin that other people had. And so my therapist at that time recommended that I just give antidepressants a try. So I was very anti-pharmaceutical and I didn't want any part of it. It's like, I'll solve my problems psychologically, but I just couldn't get out of this hole of hopelessness. So I started on antidepressants and it immediately very quickly lifted me out and I felt better. And so I just kept doing it for years and years and years. And then every time I quit, I would go into this cycle of, and I would quit slowly like prescribed, but I would go into this downward spiral. And within a few months, I was really depressed again. And so then I thought, well, I just got to be antidepressants. So I'd go back, did this back and forth for 20 years. And it was finally meditation and a little bit of, and some kind of philosophical adjustments that allowed me to live without being eager and anxious and irritable.
Well, you say philosophical. Do you mean that, because for me, it seems like there's a certain amount of just bare minimum suffering that we're supposed to just deal with.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, that's just a part of life. Everything's a part of life.
I've just come to just like, you're going to be miserable. Just fucking forget it, like, and that's kind of where I'm at. I got my whiskey. I got my weed.
Well, you know what? My favorite Alan Watts book, I'm so crazy about Alan Watts. My favorite book of his is The Wisdom of Insecurity. And the whole thing is an explanation of the realm of opposites and how Earth is based on the realm of, it is the realm of opposites. It's based on opposites. Life and death, light and dark, hot and cold, comfortable, comfort and pain, or pleasure and pain. It's just everything. And these things are not two different things. They're not truly they're not opposite. They're not two different things. They're opposite ends of the same scale. And they are not wrong. The only reason you understand the concept of security is because insecurity exists. And so it's a whole new way of looking at the problems of life. This isn't some horrible thing that's in my way forever. It's just the other end of a scale that is going back and forth. It's a beautiful philosophy. The Wisdom of Insecurity is the name of the book, and I love it.
Congratulations. You're my new spiritual guru. You're going to help me out of my atheist misery.
I hope you like it as much as I did. I don't know. I've gotten so much out of this stuff that I'm a little evangelical about it, but
sure.
Everybody's on their own journey, man. Well, you're on the road you're supposed to be on. But I encourage people, just learn to listen for that other thing. Yeah. It's there. And if you connect to it, good things happen. And who cares if you're making it up? Fuck it. Doesn't matter. You're enjoying life.
You're creating your own reality, right?
We're all creating our own reality. We make shit up all the time. We make shit up constantly. That's what humans do. We make stuff up, good and bad, to get through each day. And it's like if you can free yourself from that concept that you really know reality and recognize that anything could be possible, things just start to change.
I love that. I love that. Somebody, when I was traveling and stuff, I was very skeptical, very depressed, just hitchhiking across America, being that bohemian lifestyle. And then somebody was like, I want to do Reiki, on you. And I said, all right, I'll take anything I can get. And then they did the whole bit. And because I believed in it just a little bit, after I fucking felt great.
There you go.
Reiki. They're not even touching you. It's like, and then I walked away feeling great. So we're here with Dan Piraro, wonderful human being, fun guy to talk to. So I don't know. I'll ask you a few more questions and then have you back maybe in the new year. We do it again because is it fun for you?
Yeah.
Easy enough?
I'm enjoying it. I like telling my story.
Yeah. So your wife tells me, she wants to just, he can't stay quiet. He's got to tell his story.
And not that, it's not that I think my story is any more interesting than anybody else's. It's usually not, but I don't know.
For me, it's like this mild form of therapy to be able to sit here and talk to people and say, this and that. But yeah, I wanted to ask you about, we were talking about Eastern philosophy and, you got the Buddha and they're hip about this thing, the ahisma, which means don't harm anybody. And I recently dug that because I turned vegan because of the animals and stuff, and you were vegan for a while and you also love animals. And you use animals in your comics a lot. What's your relationship with animals?
Yeah, I feel I have always felt a great affinity for other species. And it didn't matter in my more recent mystical years, or previously as an atheist, or before that as a religious kid growing up, in a normal family. All those things, I've always felt that the way humans treat animals just has an inherent arrogance to it, as though we're something. Just historically, we're us and they're animals, as opposed to recognizing that we too are animals. I mean, yeah, we're super smart animals, but so anyway, I've always had pets. I love having dogs, as much of a pain in the ass as they are. It's kind of part of the fun.
Yep.
I think that, yeah. And I, although I'm typically more of a dog person than a cat person, but I have learned to love cats, because every woman I've ever been involved with has had a house full of cats, and my wife has always had a cat. And anyway, so I've come to really love cats as well. But I've always had an affinity for animals, and I was vegan I was a really devout vegan for 12 years. And completely ethically. It had nothing to do with my health. And I'm not a natural vegetarian or vegan, because I don't like greens. And this is actually an interesting side topic. I'm not crazy about vegetables in general. I mean, there's a handful that I like, but most of them, not so much. Okay. I can eat them. Like, there's a whole class of vegetables that I can eat, but I'd rather not, but I can. And then there's many that I cannot eat. It's like having a stranger's laundry in my mouth. It's just terrible, And I find, and the thing is, this is the curse of my biology, of my genetics, is that the healthier a food is for you, probably the more I hate it. And I hate that. I really don't like being this way. But I recently found out something interesting. Like, greens are very bitter to me. I can eat raw spinach. I can barely eat raw spinach. I cannot tolerate cooked spinach. Cannot tolerate cooked leafy greens of any kind. Completely, they taste like, it's like chewing up a handful of aspirin. They taste bitter and horrible, and I just won't do it. Well, recently I found out, somebody knew this about me, and they sent me an article. A doctor somehow put together and tested it, and found out that it was true, that people who find greens bitter have a natural defense mechanism against SARS-related viruses like COVID. And that people like me either won't get sick or will only be mildly sick, but won't get a really serious bout of COVID, and probably won't get it at all. And it's true. I haven't gotten it. Never have gotten it, although also vaccinated, but whatever. Most of the people I know here in town have had at least a minor version of it, and they've all been vaccinated too. And I'm not trying to tempt fate. I mean, maybe I'll have a version, maybe I'll get a bout. But it's the first time I was just excited about it, because it's the first time I'd ever heard any advantage to my despising greens, because all my vegan friends were always, and my animal rights activist friends were kale, spinach, whatever other horrible bitter green you can think of. Yeah. They're shoving kale burrito full of spinach. So it wasn't easy for me to be a vegan. I spent most of that time eating these highly processed faux meats and stuff. And other kinds of, and a lot of Asian stuff, rice, and a ton of beans. Thank God I like beans. It was my only source of protein. So I ate a lot of beans and stuff. And a few years ago, I became less religious about it. And I have a different philosophy. I still despise what happens on factory farms. But I no longer think that it is wrong to kill and eat animals. I know that's a
lot of people out there is just shaking their fist at you, but I'm not one of them.
I know. I get that. I don't do it myself. But I think of I just recognize that the entire ecosystem, this entire organism of planet Earth, life consumes life. It's a revolving door of life and death and life and death and life and death and life and death. And it just doesn't hit me the way it did during those years that I was an ethical vegan. So I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. Much of what I eat is vegan, and I still support animal rights, and I still oppose factory farming.
Yeah.
But I'm not the pious religious vegan that I used to be.
I think that basic awareness already sets you above and beyond, some of these drive-through McDonald's carnists that go and get, without even thinking about it, and they get it as much as they can. There are tiers to what I would prioritize as being an issue. But just the comics that you do are doing so much for that community. It's amazing. I just saw the one the other day where there's a bird in a psychiatrist's office, and he's sitting on the bench and he's talking to the psychiatrist, and he just goes, "My mother used to puke in my mouth."
I love that one. That's one of my favorites. I'm glad you brought that up. Oh man, I just sent. Oh crap! I wonder if it's time to sub that out. We're creating at this very moment. The people at King Features, which is the company that syndicates Bizarro. They just recently started this online shop, right? So they're creating a calendar for 2023 of Bizarro cartoons, and they wanted it to be all therapy cartoons. And so I pulled a bunch of therapy cartoons, and I forgot about that one. And I'm glad you reminded me, because as soon as we get off the phone here, I'm going to grab that one and send it to him and say, sub this in for something else. Because I love that one about my mother used to puke in my mouth.
Yeah. That's one of my favorites. And another one of my favorites is the lady who says, I got the tick. I went ahead and had the cat declawed. And I had my husband's, my husband's tongue cut out. And
yeah. And the kids locked in a soundproof box, I think was what it was. Yeah, I'm dead set against things like declawing. That's horrible. But,
well, no matter what the stance is, I'm personally happy that you do what you do, and I just always loved animals in the form of humor and cartoons, and no
doubt, it's a great way. I was thinking about this recently, is that I think one of the reasons that those of us who love pets love them is that it's so easy to love them unconditionally, which feels great. Like people feel this for their children. They feel unconditional love. And even if you don't have children, though, you can feel this for your pets. And it occurs to me, it's the way we should feel about each other, all of the world. We should all love each other unconditionally. But our egos make that nearly impossible. It's just so hard to get past that. He cut in front of me in line, or whatever. She didn't respect me. He didn't speak. He didn't say a word about it. Didn't thank me for this, that, whatever. It's so hard. Pets make it easy. You can love them unconditionally, and it just feels great.
Yeah. Say, let it go. Geez. There's only so much time on Earth. This is part of getting older, too, is being able to relax on certain topics and saying, I used to be reactionary, too. And animals helped me a lot, man. Really.
Oh, and they help everybody. I mean, they've proven that with prisons and nursing homes and hospitals. People around animals, it calms them. It makes them more humane.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough. It's easier to be inhumane if it's all out of sight.
On my deathbed, I said people would get their horse to come hang out with them, and I just hope that that's all I really want for the end. Just send me a horse, and then I'll be all right.
You have a horse in mind, or
any horse will do, really. A donkey even will suffice. Did you ever hear the joke about the penguin who had the car trouble?
No.
Penguin has car trouble, takes his car into the mechanic. The mechanic says, "Okay, come back in 10 minutes. I'll tell you what's wrong with your car." The penguin goes out and gets some ice cream. Okay. He comes back and he's got ice cream all over his face. And he says to the mechanic, he says, well, what's wrong with my car? And the mechanic says, well, looks like you blew a seal. And the penguin says, no, it's just ice cream.
Yeah. Okay. I was there like a tenth of a second before you said just ice cream. As soon as you said blue seal, I'm like, oh, pretty good. It's nice.
Yeah. So animals involved. It's
All
just
right.
always fun.
Thanks for the laugh.
Yeah. So, well, I'll let you go. I know that you're a busy man down there in Mexico.
Yeah, I gotta get to work on PeyoteCowboy.net.
PeyoteCowboy.net. Wait,
Yeah,
was that right? Did I say that right?
Yeah, I think you did. Yeah, it's
Okay.
that's literally what I'm going to run upstairs and do after
Cool.
I send that bird therapy cartoon to the Bizarro shop.
Do that.
All right.
I'm gonna send you a Christmas card right after we get done talking, and then I'll send you a link like in the new year of us talking, and so you know I edited it just so. So I guess let's wave goodbye to everybody out here. Thanks for coming, everybody. Thanks. We had Dan Piraro. Go check out PeyoteCowboy.net. Wonderful human being.
Bizarro.com. Bizarro.com. 1 Z, 2 R's. If you spell it any other way, it's a porn site. I guarantee it.
Bizarro.com. Okay.
Bizarro.
Yeah. Everybody check it out. Check out his comics.
All right.
See you later. Bye, everybody.